Well, welcome back to the Unity Trust Bank here at Brindley Place in Birmingham. This is the venue for our International Women's Day panel debate. And what a panel we've got for you. We've also got a studio audience here today as well. Give us a wave, give us a cheer, folks. Excellent, thank you. So Davis will be in the audience over the course of the afternoon as well, having a chat with a few of you as well. But let me introduce our panel first of all. On my immediate left, let me start. None of these people need introduction, but we're very polite here, so we're going to give them one anyway. Diane Benussi to my immediate left. Now, Diane, with her matrimonial law firm, Benussi & Co. in its fifth decade now, nationally respected divorce lawyer, also founder of business support organisation Birmingham Forward, which was set up in 1990. Next along, somebody I haven't interviewed probably for 6 or 7 years, maybe a few years more than that, which is Rosie Ginday. Now, Rosie's founder and CEO of social enterprise company Miss Macaroon, a bakery that takes on young people, training and mentoring them, and its products are stocked by high-end retailers like Selfridges. We'll get stuck into that. She's also been awarded an MBE for her work mentoring young people. Next along the line, somebody who appeared on one of our shows giving us her 90 seconds with views a few months ago is Nicola Fleet-Milne. Nicola, well known, founded for running her own property company. She's chair of Colmore Bid, helps to steer the district through the hugely disruptive years of COVID and lots more besides. And last but not least, the CEO of Unity Trust Bank here, Debbie Hazell, who's the host of us here today and sponsor indeed of the show. Now, Debbie's got an unparalleled international corporate experience in the region, having been based in New York with various high-level banking roles. So I'm sure you'll agree we've got a fantastic panel, high-level and diverse panel for debate today. So let's get into our first question. And really, in fact, Diane, if it's all right, seeing as you're sitting next to me,
I don't have any option.
I'll throw this. Yeah, no, you don't have any option, actually. No. I just wonder whether you feel like an event like this and the conversations we are going to have today would or could have possibly happened when you first founded your business 30, 40 years ago. How different was the environment then for a woman in business?
I think the environment was different in everything, not just being a woman in business. But one of the things that I do remember, that not long after I'd set up my business, standing in the first floor, looking down on the street and seeing people queued in the traffic, and someone turning and looking at our brass plate, which was beautifully polished, and saying, "It's 2 women," as if we were aliens from a zoo or something like that. So I don't think you get that anymore.
Were you conscious of that right from the start when you were founding the business, though, or did it surprise
No, I think
you?
we were above it. We were just floating along, and if people said things or made jokes or anything like that, we didn't know about it. It was covert.
And was the legal profession in itself, when you were training, much like that? Were you
Were
you a woman in a man's world?
No, I'm sorry. In saying we were above it, the reason I had the arrogance to set up a business when I'd only been a solicitor for 2 years was because I looked around me and couldn't believe the disgraceful conditions the officers were in. It was awful, absolutely awful. I said that the reception of the firm I was working in was worse than a DHSS waiting room. It was lino on the floor. It was just horrible, and there was no comfort, and the staff were in dreadful conditions. Nobody thought about things like that in those days, and we thought we could do better.
Rosie, what about you? I mean, from the time when you set up your business to now, how much has the climate changed in your world?
Yeah, we've been going for 12 years now. So there's been huge shifts and also not very much movement at all in lots of different ways. So this kind of forum is fantastic just to keep the conversation going. I guess it depends on which kind of bubble you're in. We run a social enterprise. Actually, it's pretty equitable, but it's a sector where people give a lot of time for free. It's quite caring. So, generally it's expected that it's 50-50 or roundabouts. And for me, as a social enterprise that works with a lot of corporates, it's about making sure, equity and inclusion really, permeates through those organisations as well. And within that time, you can definitely see there's been a shift in speaking and in action and in some great campaigns as well.
To the point now where actually you don't really want to be conscious that it's happening, you just want it to happen, to just be, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're pretty far off that. But we're not having the conversations about should we be doing it and what does it look like. It's actually, best practice implementation and real outcomes and long-lasting change and, intersectionality. So the what we're talking about is very different. I mean, I had a conversation probably only 3 or 4 years ago talking about should we be talking about equity and inclusion? And it's just like, come on, we finished that a long time ago. Why are we still having that conversation? So there have been real shifts.
Nicola, from your point of view, I mean, wearing, I guess, 2 different hats, your own business, but then also the bid. What's your sector like from the point of view? Do you relate to a lot of the things that these two have said here?
Well, it's interesting that Diane said that, 40 years ago, that was her experience, because Fleet-Milne will be 19 on Sunday. And so 19 years ago, that was still my experience, was just a world in which I think people just were taking things for granted slightly. Work would just come to them because there wasn't much else by way of choice. So actually only a couple of years out of uni, and I decided to set up Fleet-Milne. And it was much the same way. I wanted to create a really lovely, comfortable working environment. It wasn't just clients I wanted to look after. I wanted to look after my team just as much. And that wasn't something that I'd experienced. And as much as, we could go down the route of what I didn't like about things, I at least learnt what I didn't want to replicate. So I went into my own business knowing I wanted to spend a lot more time mentoring people, bringing women up the ranks. Over the years, you hear a lot of stories about, there used to be a scenario where a lot of women might get up to a certain point and kind of close off or pull up the ladder behind them. But that, I don't see that happening anymore. I see an awful lot more of putting down extra ladders and helping people to come up, because otherwise it gets very lonely. You want everyone to come up with you and where you can surpass you as well.
Although, yeah, of course, interestingly, all 3 of you have gone down the route of setting up your own business to actually make that happen, haven't you? Did you feel, was it a choice, or was it your only choice? Was it an option? Was there a crossroads moment? Was there?
We didn't have any choice.
Yeah, I think I had a burning desire to change the system, and I decided it wasn't going to happen by sitting on the sidelines. I had to kind of kick the door open, get in and make it for myself. And of course, once you're making it for yourself, you can control what that looks like as well. So that works better than trying to tinker from the inside on your own.
And Debbie, I mean, in your sector, is it fair to say you are still female CEOs in your position are still in a significant minority, aren't they?
Very significant minority. And if you look at the numbers in finance, I was quite involved in gender balance in my old role in New York. It was around 20% of senior management was women. But that was a bit of a cheat, because they counted senior management as the 2 levels above me and the level below me. So if you cut it off at my level, it was probably single digits. So yeah, very, very small minority in senior roles.
Because you've obviously got experience at the top level on both sides of the Atlantic. How different is it in the UK to what you'd experienced in the US from that point of view?
It's about the same. It really is about the same. Yeah, it's an industry issue, and a lot of the organisations are global organisations, so it just carries over. So very similar in both jurisdictions.
But do you feel, in the same way as the 3 of you all said, you feel like progress, movement is there? Do you still encounter things that surprise you about how maybe backwards some thinking actually is?
I mean, I encountered loads of things. So it's not as bad as it was then. I mean, if you think about it, it's only 20 plus years ago that women were permitted to wear trousers in the workplace in banking. So let's just put some context there. There's a lot of things. Like when I walk in a room, nobody expects me to be in the role that I'm in. Nobody thinks, oh, there's the CEO, and I get the double take when I announce, what my role is. And sometimes I don't announce because it's kind of more fun to let people find out. But I've had that throughout my career, whatever role I've been, whether I've been like portfolio manager, managing money, or in the lead roles, like the CEO roles I've been in. There's never an expectation that it would be me. And you walk in a room with a group of people, and the customer or the client will go to the guy because they just assume that that's the most senior person. So you're constantly dealing with these like low expectations.
Can the 3 of you relate to that? Do you have similar experiences?
Yeah. I went to a meeting only 3 years ago, and there were 25 of us in the room, only 2 females, and we've all been waiting outside prior to going into the meeting. And one of the guys turned to me just before we went in and he handed me his coffee cup and said, "Oh, I don't need this anymore. Do you want to get rid of that?" I said, "Well, I'm not staff. I'm actually part of the meeting." And he was so embarrassed. But it was half-half.
Yeah.
I was amused by it because I was amused at his embarrassment. But I was also devastated that was just his completely natural assumption.
Yeah.
So
You've seen similar, have you, Diane, to that?
I think we've all experienced it, but I think we're insulated because we've got our own firms.
Yeah.
So if they don't know who we are, that's their problem, not ours. And I think that's a lot of the stuff we're talking about, is realising that what we think is our problem is their problem, because we're here.
And the people will throw back, "Oh, it's an unconscious bias. No, there's no, it wasn't done deliberately. You didn't realise." Can you relate to those kind of stories, Rosie?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we all have biases. We all have privileges. We all have, positions that we come from that mean that we have to put in extra work to overcome them. And I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's just something that's within our continual professional development, and we're the only people that can really push ourselves forward. So some people need more work, some people need less work, and actually there'll be people who are 10 years younger than us, 15 years younger than us, that will be shocked by our attitudes and what we say. So we've all got work to do.
And other than sitting on a panel like this and talking to us, how do you try to use events like International Women's Day to take the conversation forward? What do you do? How useful do you feel it is?
I think it's incredibly useful. I think it's just a point to stop and reflect. I think, there's lots of doors that are open, but they're selective doors. And, with the glass ceiling, I think that's still there. And there are lots of people who are pushing through glass ceilings, but then they get to the next one and there's the next one, and you're not really sure kind of when that stops. I think a lot of us are on different panels, different boards, different sector kind of bodies, and as soon as you step out of a particular bubble, you realise what the kind of constraints are, and it's a constant thing. You have to keep pushing.
yeah. And I think it's important you saying that it's not just about what we think of others. We're also having to check ourselves. And International Women's Day, although it is celebrated on one day of the year, actually every day of the year, we should always be thinking about, actually, could I have phrased that better? Should I be thinking more carefully before I speak about that? Should I be promoting this positivity more? So there's always things that we can be doing every day.
There's that double-edged thing, isn't there, Debbie? I was talking to some people a couple of weeks ago about Apprenticeships Week, and the same conversation was, well, why are we only talking about championing how great apprenticeships are for 1 week in February? And you ask, well, why do you need a day like this?
Yeah, I think it's important. I totally agree. We should be thinking about that every day of the year. And actually, quite frankly, I think most of us women probably do, but it's the people that are not impacted don't. So if International Women's Day gets people, gets men and thinking about, well, actually, that's their experience, or listening to the lived experience. And one of the things I tell a lot of the women all the time is actually not us. To your point, it's their problem, it's not. But we're impacted by the problem. So in the environment where the work environment, the corporate environment, there's so many programs on sort of women's leadership, the whole Fix the Women thing. Actually, what you need the hiring managers, who are predominantly men, because there's only 10% women at the very senior levels. You need the hiring managers understanding that you've got to look into the organisation, you've got to recognise talent for talent, not recognise talent for the package that it's in. And if more people were to pick the women up and promote them at the same levels as men, because when you look at the numbers, that right from the beginning we hire, sort of bigger organisations, sort of 50-50 men and women at the entry level, and then it just filters down till you get to the top levels, and it's 10%, as I say. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of excuses that put out there for that. Women self-select out for maternity, etc. Sure, there might be an element of that, but the real issue is that talent is not being recognised by the people that are promoting and the people that are paying, which is why there's gender pay gap. And that's an opportunity. International Women's Day is an opportunity for people to really think about, actually, what am I doing and what am I not doing, and what is my responsibility to try and balance things out.
It's also, as well, along that same line, important for the next generation of female entrepreneurs to have role models, to have people they can relate to, isn't it? To be able to say, well, yeah, I could do this because look, look what's being done. Did you feel, Diane, that there were people that you looked up to, or did you feel like you were trailblazing at the time? Was there anyone that you used as a motivation to say, yeah, I can do this?
I think I've been very lucky. I've had people in my life that have said one thing that I've remembered, and that's been very good at guiding me along. And I've had lots of people that have said things to me, like 2 senior partners in legal practices who said, Poppet, I'll never have a female partner. And I really am grateful to those 2 guys, because within 2 years of qualifying, I knew I'd got to do it myself and things like that. But can I just say, to take it to another level, I deal with people and their relationships all the time. And one of the things that I'm very aware of, that we're in a bubble, we've all made it, and we don't have any problem because we're all accepted for what we are. So we are shrink wrapped. But if you go into society and you actually look at how people conduct their lives, women's lives haven't changed in 40 years. Women still don't have the conduct of the finances of the family. Women still defer to their husbands. And I am absolutely shocked. There's a law about controlling, and now, but we don't use it very much. But that's something we've known about forever. So we're talking about our business community, but if women's lives, when they get home, are servile's very, very strong word, but if they are controlled at home, or allow themselves to be controlled at home, then in a way, us talking about how we're going to bring them on in their jobs, they need to be brought on in their relationships. And that's taking it down to a sort of micro level of what women are actually experiencing. And the everyday tales, they're laughable, because you can't believe that the people that we meet are having such ghastly lives. And they're women, and they're suffering from being women. So it's a society problem.
And it's true, you can't be expected just to switch off one part of your life, switch on another, is it? So I know we're going to have lots more questions. That's a great scene setter. We'll take a quick break now, find out what Davis has got to tell us from the audience in just a minute. Don't go anywhere, we're back in a minute.
We're excited to have an amazing studio audience filled with remarkable people, men and women, that are concerned about issues surrounding women. Now, I'm here with Denise Myers, and Denise is an expert in the recruitment space. She runs a diversity-led recruitment agency called Evenfield. And she's been in the space, working with different people and trying to help people advance in their careers. The question I've got for you, Denise, is when it comes to issues around women in the workplace, how far have we come, and what else is there to do?
Okay, well, we haven't come far enough. That's a fact. With regards to gender, the dial is moving, and we are seeing improvements, and we are seeing people rise through the ranks. But with respect of ethnicity and gender together, we haven't scratched the surface there yet.
And that's quite interesting because, you know, with all the conversations that we tend to have around International Women's Day and other days across the year, you would think that much is being done in terms of actually moving the needle and making change happen. What is it that you're seeing from the perspective of business owners and also from the perspective of the people being employed as well, in terms of what is being done and what is not being done?
Okay, so I think what is being done now, and this is probably since 2020, we are seeing the acknowledgement, and people are talking about it more now. You know, and the Gen Z, the young generations coming through, they're not standing for any of it. So they are talking about it. So that, I think that's good and that's positive. But I think the next thing is the action. Action needs to be taken, and organisations need to put some real strategies and plans in place of how they're going to tackle this, especially in cities like Birmingham and London, where, you know, the minority is now the majority.
Absolutely, and I think that that is very important. You've touched on what the organizations need to do, but very quickly before we go back to the panel, talk to me about what individuals need to do themselves. So young women get into the workforce and experiencing, all those different type of discrimination or preconceived notions, what should they do in terms of how they carry themselves, mindset, actions that they could take, and all of that?
That's a really good question. I think that the first thing that they need to do is to try and work out how to overcome barriers and be aware of them and know that they are going to come, and how they're going to tackle that. They can do that by there's lots of reading out there that they can do, but there's also they can get a coach, and they can ask advice from relatable role models. We've talked about that today, and I think that's really, really important. Find somebody who's made it or who is making it, and follow their lead.
And if the audience in the room and the panel is anything to go by, we have no shortage of role models. I'll take you back to Carl now as he continues to talk to the panel.
A quick thanks to Miss Macaroon for supplying us with the refreshments for the panel during the first commercial break. Thank you very much. And you've paced it nicely, so I can see another commercial break coming very soon. We're all right. Just Rosie, just picking up on one of the things Davis was saying there. Do you think Birmingham is set up as a city for, I say female entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs in general? Do you how easy is it, and what are there holes in the portfolio, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some fantastic entrepreneur accelerators out there, and there's lots of support. There's amazing role models. We've got some really vibrant kind of support systems within business districts, within business improvement districts. I think there's definitely some holes in there, but for the size of city that we do have a huge amount of startups. I think 2 years ago we were the city outside of London that had the most new company startup. Obviously that's a proportion of those, probably not quite as many as should be, are set up by women or have women co-founders. So I think there's definitely a bit of a need for these kind of events to really get the message out there and to get out in the diverse communities as well. We have incredible communities out there that actually setting up businesses, running up businesses in the blood, is normal for within those cultures as well. So it's just kind of, pulling that out and making sure that the right kind of support is there to make sure that, that's not lost. As we say, we want our kids to have better opportunities than we had, and actually, making sure that we're not losing that entrepreneurial mindset when people are going into the kind of the professions that maybe pay a little bit more, actually that we kind of reinvest within those communities as well, I think is key.
If you were setting up your business now compared to 11 or 12 years ago when you did, would it be easier for you?
I don't know. I think that's quite difficult to tell. Obviously, with the cost of living crisis, potential recession, going out of, impacts of COVID, being a social enterprise, being a retail business, a manufacturing business, there's, huge headwinds. I think I'd be terrified to set up a business now, to be honest. I set up Miss Macaroon with £500 of personal funds and grew it organically, took our first bit of investment in to set up our retail business within kind of 5 years. And I don't know that I'd have that same confidence right now.
And I mean, Nicola, with your wearing your Colmore bid hat, I mean, you're obviously exposed to the views of a lot of different kinds of businesses in the city. What's the sentiment like at the moment?
In terms of the entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
it's an interesting one because the number of entrepreneurial firms that are in the Colmore Business District is probably a lot smaller than you would find across the whole city. So we're not as in contact with so many of those. And in fact, Rosie actually sits on my board, and so she's the best person to ask. But I think to reflect on the question you kind of asked Rosie, I think that now I would find it easier to set up a new business, just in terms of the broad level and diverse kind of ways of supporting people. I mean, the day that I set up Fleet-Milne, so much, looking back, so much wasn't done the way that it should have been done, didn't have the right support mechanisms, the mentoring side was much harder then. It wasn't not there, it just was a lot harder to find those things. But one thing that I think has always struck me about Birmingham is that I've always found it's a very willing city everybody wants to help. Everybody's really happy. Introductions are just, they come from everywhere. And it's just actually really lovely. I'm not surprised that Birmingham is the second biggest, after London, but it's just a wonderful city to set up a business in. But there is so much more support now that I think the youngsters would be able to draw upon, so much more.
And Diane, when you set up Birmingham Forward in the early 1990s, was part of the motivation for that to fill some of these gaps that we're talking about here?
I didn't set up Birmingham Forward.
You're not fine?
No,
Okay.
Birmingham Forward morphed out of City 2000, which was the organisation that had been running in anticipation of the year 2000. And suddenly, when we got to it, they thought they ought to change the name because it wasn't appropriate anymore.
Right.
So I was chairman of Birmingham Forward. So
did the aims and objectives change at the same time as the title then at that point?
I hope we became a bit more feminised. It was very much a masculine organisation. I'm sure it's not now, but I remember going into the first board meeting and I was the only female there, and they were all back slapping and ho-ho-hoing, and I thought I'd gone along for a serious meeting, and they were all discussing what they'd been doing last night and with whom.
We better not follow that train of thought.
No. So it was a bad life, and it was an embarrassing life because we were invisible, so they could talk about what they'd been doing, and we weren't supposed to even notice.
So do you can relate then presumably to what we were saying? We were saying a bit earlier that in that scenario, it makes it very difficult to encourage other women to want to make the extra effort to break into and volunteer and come forward and sit on committees like that.
I think there's an expressed intention. For about 10 years I was on an RBS board, and that was about finance for women setting up businesses, and there were, I don't know why I was on it, but there were a lot of hard-hitting women on it. It was an amazing group of women, and we were talking and talking to the board about what they were doing wrong because they weren't supporting women. And to an extent I feel that women setting up a business, I know several women that will tell the tale that their husband wouldn't allow them to mortgage the house or put that as collateral because they didn't want to risk it. I'm sure the wife wouldn't have said to her husband, oh no, you can't do that to our house. But that does happen to women a lot. Well, it certainly was happening a lot in those days, and I imagine it still does, that women don't find it so easy to use the matrimonial assets because the husband won't agree to it. It makes it sound as if we're in the 19th century, and to an extent I think we need to realise it is still like that out there. We're all there, we're polished, we're okay, all up the ladder.
And I mean, Debbie, I was talking to some of your colleagues while we've been in here today setting up for the show, and a lot of them have been very keen to talk about how important it is that a company looks after its staff and looks after, particularly whether it's the cost of living crisis, whether it's how they've handled COVID lockdown. It's very important to realise that different people from different sectors, different genders, are having different problems at different times, isn't it?
It is, and we try very hard to be inclusive, and it's up to the staff, to the team, to tell me whether we truly are. But we're a bank. We're focused on having a good bottom line, but we're also we're a double bottom line with social impact bank. So you can't be out there lending and doing social good if you're not taking care of the people inside the organisation. So it is the thread that runs through everything that we do, and people that come to work for the bank are really focused on our mission as well. So we're very mindful of the fact that it's been hard for people with inflation rises, rent rises, mortgage going up. So we've done what we can as a bank to help them. We're very focused on policies. We've just changed our family policies from maternity and paternity to family, and we've increased the amount of time that people can take and how much they're paid during those times, because we can't expect people to give their full selves to us if we're not giving ourselves to them when in their personal lives. And to your point earlier, how people are at home is really important to what they bring to the office. So if there's anything that we can do to create a better environment at home, then within the bounds of the operations, then we want to do that. We want to do that, and we get it back tenfold from the organisation. So we give, for example, 5 volunteer days to everybody so that they can go out and use their time to support the community, and people use it. and people use it, and they really support the community. And within the bank, we have an organisation called Unity and Me, which has been set up by employees, which is about volunteering and is about the environment and take good care of health and well-being within the organisation. It's employee-led, and that's really important for the employees as well. So that's not me. That's everybody taking care of themselves and the people around them.
Do you think though as well, one of the things, I mean maybe one of the positives, if you can call it that, that's come out of COVID is the fact that employers are now having to look at more flexible ways of running their companies. We're not all 9 to 5, we're not 5 days a week. And do you think that flexibility maybe breaks down some of the barriers sometimes for women to progress in the workplace?
Yeah, it does. So no longer, will somebody say, sorry, can I take Tuesday off because I've got to, have a doctor's appointment or whatever it is. It's just work from home and zip off for an hour. I don't care. And I'm really clear that it's about output. It's about, are you getting your job done? And I'm not, and nobody in the organisation is on people to say, do this. Everybody's very focused on what they want to achieve in their role. We obviously got targets, and we've got our strategy, and we've got our plan, and it's up to everybody to individually deliver to that. I don't mind where people are. I mean, it's nice when everybody's in the office. Like Tuesdays tend to be a big day, Wednesdays quite a big day as well. And there's a real buzz, and it's great satisfaction to get that buzz in the office because people are interacting with one another. Friday, pretty quiet day in the office, but that's completely fine because productivity doesn't go down. It's just people operating in a different way. So I'm so happy. It's unfortunate that we had to have COVID to do this. I mean, for years, where we brought video conferences in the systems in the bank, in my previous banks, like 20 years ago, and says, "Oh, we'll see our customers and we'll see our clients on video," and we'll. No, we don't. We still go out to see them, and we still insist that people come into the office. But it's completely feasible to run a strong business and do it with hybrid working, so that people can work out what's optimal for them.
And Nicola, are you conscious that maybe that's become more part of your role as an employer to make that work for people then, or?
Yeah, well, the industry that I'm in though is a fairly present industry, so. Actually, during COVID, we did a lot of online viewings, but our preference is for in-person because we all know that when you meet a person, you see various sort of social cues in the way that people behave. You can tell if somebody's telling you the truth or not, that kind of stuff. So we have done a lot more by way of people, most of the team are in 5 days a week. Many of them by choice. Some of them, it's just the role that they fulfill. They can't do their viewings from home. There are a couple of people who it just works better for them not to have to come into the office, and it's all kind of on individual arrangement. So it's not a one size fits all, it's things being set up. But interestingly, from the bids perspective, we've obviously had a real challenge around that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So there's been an impact for our hospitality and leisure in terms of which days of the week are busier. So, in the olden days, it was Thursday nights and Fridays were really busy. That's all shifted slightly. The offices are busier Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But interestingly, it's not like there's a total shutdown. Mondays are not completely dead. Fridays are not completely dead. And the evenings are not. There's the Colmore bid has become almost two sides of a coin here. So you have the workers during the day for the offices, but actually there's so much hospitality and leisure now that the evenings, it's also a lot busier than it ever was before because a lot of people are coming into town just to come out. People want to leave their homes, especially if you've been working all day from home. Yeah. You want to get out, go and do something. There's theatres, there's bars, restaurants, etc. So it's an interesting one because I don't think that debate will go away for a very long time, like the impact on the office sort of vibe.
But it's great to hear because it means that people can mix and match a job role that suits their own personal circumstances, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's a little bit of a shame. So Fleet-Milne is predominantly females actually, and I've made apologies for that in the past, and I really wish I hadn't because I don't apologise. I find that I attract more females into my business, and that's just kind of the way that it is. There are guys that work there, and they're very well looked after just the same as the girls, but there are more females, and it means that the firm operates in a way that is more understanding, I think, of the female challenges that they have. So when I referred to somebody who's, working from home a little bit more, well, I have somebody who's single parent family with 3 kids, and I'm not going to insist that she comes into the office because that suits me. I need to find out. She's brilliant. She does her job brilliantly, and she's really part of the team. And interestingly, we kind of offered, look, do you want to just permanently work from home? And she said, oh no. I do need time away from those children. But she wants to be able to come into the office and see people and go for a drink after work and still be part of the team and the office vibe. But interestingly, that the guys don't have perhaps the same pressures on their times. They're not expected to be at home. I mean, to be fair to them, none of them is a single parent with 3 kids. So, and if they were, we'd be having a different conversation if that suited them better.
And that's where the flexibility, really
yes,
fits in,
that's where it
doesn't
really is quite handy.
Hold that thought. It's time for another macaroon commercial break. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're going to catch out some news headlines, which Henry's going to bring you right now, and then we'll be back to find out who Davis has caught up with in the audience. See you in a minute.
Back to fabulous people in the audience, and I'm going to be talking to Iman El Alawi. We came to the UK when you were 13, correct? And you are the co-founder of Entech SI, and I want you to touch on something that the panel was talking about earlier, the issue of unconscious biases, because in the business world today we have, preconceived notions and things of that nature. From your experience, what are the things that you've seen in terms of unconscious biases that people tend to bring into the workplace or into business conversations?
It's really interesting listening to the panelists earlier, and everything they've said resonates with me personally. Entech SI is a business that's been made up by 2 people, 1 male, 1 female, me, and we always struggled, even up to 5 years ago, walking into a business meeting, if the 2 of us were in that meeting. Obviously, there's me, female, and with a slightly unusual name. They always deferred to my business partner, Peter. And it takes so much effort to be able to work within that environment to get them to a point where they actually can defer to you and understand that you are an equal partner in that. But I see that not just in the business world, I see it in the personal situations as well. So I fly fixed-wing aircraft. It's something I took up as a hobby 5 years ago again. And every time I land at an airport, if there's a male partner with me in that particular scenario, you go to pay the landing fee, they defer to him, and they think he's the pilot. So you see it on a personal level, and also you see it at a very business level.
So it's not just in the world of business, it's a societal thing, you think?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think it just feels, and again, the panelists said it earlier, it feels that you have to work extra hard and you have to prove yourself again and again, both at a personal level and equally at a business level.
And what are those things that you think we need to begin to do about it? What actions can we take?
I think there's quite a lot we can do. As business leaders and business owners, we can do more, I feel. For instance, in Entech SI, we are 62% female. So that's not a conscious decision, but it is only because finding the right people to do the job, that seems to be the case. And we have been for quite some time. I think us CEOs, we have to work a little bit harder and be more mindful in terms of helping people along that journey. But equally, I think we as business leaders, again, we can mentor. I think that was discussed a few times. And I think we're in a great position to be role models and to work with people who can be role models for those who are aspiring to work, particularly in our sector as well, because we're very much in the tech sector. So that tends to be a little bit more challenging for females as well. And the other thing I think we can do, and we can all do that, is to call it out and be upfront about it and stand there and say, excuse me, I am who I am, or I am the person who flew that aircraft in. And I think until we do that, that's always going to be a challenge. Quite often we find a lot of people, once you call it out, they stand there and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise. So it's just calling it out that needs to be done more, I feel.
I totally agree with you, because I think that there's some excellent work being done by amazing women all over the place, and it's just not being recognized enough. So thank you very much for drawing attention to that. We're going to go back to the panel now, where Carl is eagerly waiting to talk to our fantastic panel.
Thanks very much, Davis. Yes, I am indeed eagerly waiting. Got lots more questions to try and get through before the end of the show. Rosie, coming to you from this one, and maybe this follows on very interestingly from here about the issue of role models and whether you have someone to aspire to. I know you do quite a lot of mentoring work, don't you, and working with with young people to help them through. Are you conscious that one of the things you really need to do when you're working with them is be their role model, or point them in the direction of role models for them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of the Macaroons That Make a Difference training course is having inspirational speakers, and it's really important for those inspirational speakers to be from diverse backgrounds, and for some of them to have been in their position only 6 months, a year before, because actually they are incredibly inspiring. They might not have had a job before, and they've got their first job, and they've overcome loads of barriers. So really being able to hone in on everybody's strengths and give, equally value those. I think that's really important to do, so that actually they can feel like they can quite quickly become those role models as well. For me, it's really important to provide leadership opportunities for young people as well. So some of the graduates of the programme created their own programme called Maximad Leaders, where they get skilled up. They do safeguarding training, mental health first aid training, presentation skills. They get lots of counselling as well. And they go out and promote our programme. They go support trainees and potential trainees. They actually advise our board on how they should spend the profits to support other young people. And it's amazing that they have developed that programme from a blank piece of paper with a little bit of facilitation support from one of our special advisors. And it's
How
just
rewarding is that?
It's
Really
incredible.
amazing.
It's incredible for them to be able to move into that leadership position very quickly, and for that to open doors for them, be on national ad campaigns and speak to CEOs and partners of huge kind of professional services firms. I think that's what we can do. I think, when I sit on different panels, I always try and push the fact that actually I'm really fortunate to be in my situation, and I learn loads from every single opportunity that I am able to take part in. But actually we can all open the door just by bringing in a junior team member. Every single meeting we go to, every single board we sit on, being able to bring a junior person so that they can see what kind of conversations happen, and they can see that it's not always that scary, and just trying to set up youth boards and youth committees or advisory groups just to enable people to have those kind of conversations and just get more confident in those areas is really important, because they are the mentors, they are the inspirational people for not even tomorrow, for today.
And Diane, how conscious are you, have you been over the years, that you are needing to be or are being a role model to other people that aspire to do what you've done?
I don't think I've ever thought about it. I think if you're busy, you don't think about what you're doing. You just think about doing it, don't you? And I think I've been very busy and not had time to step back. In fact, the only time I stepped back was when I got to do a speech recently, and I just stopped, and I was lying in bed actually thinking, instead of getting out of bed, making my bed, getting on with the day, I actually decided I'd lie in bed for a few minutes, and I'd got to prepare a document and a speech. And I lay there thinking about it, and I was thinking, what can I say? And I was sort of going back over things. None of us have got time for that. We haven't got time to think, am I a role model? Am I this? You're just being. Well, you're not being a human being a human doing. We haven't got time to be a being, because that's static. And so, no, I'm not a role model. I'm just doing what I'm doing. And if someone follows and thinks it's worth copying, or that's good, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a person.
Debbie, I could see you nodding to some of the things Diane was saying there. Do you feel is there extra pressure maybe because of the job you've got that you feel you need to be an extra mentor or role model to people?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would definitely not call it pressure, but I was just sort of nodding to what you were saying about sort of not really being aware. So I think probably the first 20 years of my career, I was completely oblivious to that, completely oblivious. And the switch went on when I took my second leadership role, and the way that I was greeted by a lot of women in the organisation, they made a point of coming out to find me because, like, we got a female CEO, and oh, good for you. I'm like, wow, actually that's pretty special, and I hadn't really thought about that at all that way. And then seeing that reaction made me realise I actually do have a real responsibility here. So whether I choose to be a role model or not, I'm being perceived in that way by a certain level of the population. Very interesting, of course, it's the women that are so happy to see a female CEO. And that led me to do a lot more gender work in the organisation, and and I won't say I mentor women, but I'm always there. I make myself available if people want to ask questions. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of, I'm going a different pathway here, but I'm not a huge fan of like formal mentoring conversations. I think they're a little bit false. But if I make myself available, so if anybody's got an issue that they want to talk about or bounce something off me, my door will always be open. And I find when you put yourself out there like that, a lot of people take you up on it. And actually, particularly now, I'm seeing a lot of my contacts over the years reaching out, have lost their jobs, made redundant and so forth, asking for contacts and help and resume. Absolutely happy to do that, because women have got to help women because other people don't.
Do you think some of those requests that you're getting maybe would have, if it was a few years ago, they wouldn't have felt able to do that, do you think, or not?
I think it's more about how you position yourself. I mean, I always say I have an open door policy, literally and figuratively. I think it's how you position yourselves. And one of the things I'm very clear on is, there's the role that I do, and then there's who I am. And I also think that, given that a lot of men have been like bank CEOs in the past, very few women, then it's been positioned as this really important job, and it's really hard and really difficult. And it's not, actually. That's this little secret.
You're not supposed to tell people.
Yeah, I know I'm not supposed, but it's, so we're all doing a job. My job happens to be, a different job from other people's job. So when you make yourself accessible and sort of don't put yourself in the ivory tower, then it enables people to feel more comfortable to have those conversations with you.
I mean, Nicola, from your point of view, by the sound of it, you've got no shortage of potential female role models in your organisation, have you? So.
I've got the same sort of position as you, actually, that I've always found official mentoring, I find it a little bit difficult because I'm a real solutionizer, and if someone tells me a problem, I immediately go into, right, how can we actually fix this? And that's not really what mentoring is about. It's supposed to be a lot more kind of asking questions than finding the solution. But I still sign up for it, and I still take part on the basis that it's my way of being, it's kind of my way of being available. So my team at work know that I'm available. Anybody who knows me knows that you just have to ask, and yeah, of course I've got time, I'll always make time. But I do think that the mentoring sort of scenario is incredibly important, because sometimes until you're in that arena, you don't know who's available, or you don't always believe that they're available because you're not there yet. And sometimes the mentoring sort of process will bring you into that arena. And then once you're there, the world opens up to you, really. So I have actually got a new mentee recently, and I had to warn her because she did say to me at the beginning of one of our chats, I'm not massively happy in the role that I'm in. I was like, look, I just need you to know the last 3 people I've mentored left their jobs. So, you could be the 4th. This is a real possibility. But partly because a lot of the time they'll open up, because I've always had female mentees, people open up and tell you the stuff that they haven't felt they could tell somebody at work. And the amount of toxicity in some firms is genuinely shocking. And my solutionising is get out of that toxic environment, because actually the world is not all toxic. There are lots of wonderful firms. It sounds like your firm is a wonderful place to work. You want people to find their role and their place and be happy about it. I mean, who wants to go to work dreading it? Not me. So, you know, I'd do whatever I can with that, but I'm like, I just need you to know this is kind of how it operates. So,
do you think that women take it on the chin far more, so that the thing that they're describing is to us, we're listening to it thinking, oh my God, you're not putting up with that.
Yeah.
But we're actually holding up a mirror to them, because half the time they've just taken it. And when you say that's absolutely unacceptable, they go, really? Do you think it's unacceptable?
well,
And
this
it's
is young
shocking.
people as well
Yeah.
who maybe haven't yet realised that they've just assumed that that's it. You know how it is. You've got people in your team and this is their first job, so they don't know any different. Sometimes people leave your firm and then they look back and say, oh wow, that was actually a really lovely environment to work in. I assumed all jobs were like that because it was my first job. And in this particular case, it's her first job, but in a toxic environment. So her assumption is everywhere's toxic. And I'm busy saying, the mirror to her was my face going, wow, I would not work around these people. I absolutely wouldn't. But it still has to be her choice to make that move. So,
but of course, if companies don't really want to change the status quo, and going back to what you were saying earlier, that perhaps historically, if decision makers are all men and they want to keep it that way, it's in their interest to foster that kind of belief, isn't it? Sometimes, and that slows down the evolution, doesn't it? Do you think?
I don't think the men know. I don't think they know how toxic they are, frankly.
We're not half as clever as you think we are, actually.
If you were half as clever as I think you are, you'd be really dim. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you know what? I love a panel that speaks their mind. This is excellent. I'm doing this without an auto-cue.
No, what I was saying was they really have got a toxic environment. The guy at the top is an absolute so-and-so. The others are his acolytes and going around learning how to do it really effectively. And they just don't understand because they're insulated and they don't understand how unhappy they make people.
But it's not in their interest to do anything about that insulation, is it?
No.
That's the thing. So,
I had 4 mentors that changed jobs. Before you started saying that, I was thinking that's why I stopped mentoring, because 4 people changed their jobs, did something entirely different. I was sitting there thinking, what am I doing wrong? I've decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do, be an airline pilot or something like that instead of a teacher.
We'll be back for our 4th and final section of the debate here from Unity Trust Bank in a couple of minutes. Back to the studio now for some more news headlines from Henry, and then I'll see if Diane and I can make up in the break.
I'm sorry.
I'm now going to be chatting with Fidelis Navis, who is the Community Director of Warwickshire County Cricket Club. And you've been in the charity industry for more than 20 years?
Not quite more than 20, thank you. But
So that was close. That was close. Now, the charity sector is quite an interesting one. And now that we're talking about issues around International Women's Day and challenges that women face in the world of business, are there any issues and challenges that are peculiar to women in the charity sector?
I think that you could say that the charity sector is predominantly female, and therefore you might say within this arena, well, if we're all female, we're all up for each other, we're all supporting each other, we're all there to help and guide and all the things we've been talking about today about mentoring. But subsequently, I've seen, sadly, moments where we've not done that over the years, but also that means that if you look at the top jobs, there's often too many men, in my opinion, insofar as if you really want to be a leader within the charity sector, you tend to be male. That's definitely changing, but that would be an issue. As a woman in the charity sector, we tend to be in the lower jobs.
And that's quite interesting because when it comes to conversations around women in business, sometimes one of the things that come up is there's some sectors that are more suited to women and some sectors that are more suited to men. Is that something we've made up in our mind?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. I totally dispute that fact. To be within the charity sector, you need to be as hard as nails with a very strong heart. And you might say that you need that within every sector, but the charity sector is not for the weak, for sure. Yeah, if that's what you're implying by being a female. Maybe that's my assumption, which you've just made, but no.
And you touched on something earlier about in the roles in the charity sector being predominantly female when it comes to the lower end of the roles, and then when you get to the higher up and the C-suite, you get to find a lot of males. Why do you think that has been the case?
Maternity leave, gender pay gap. So it's not exclusively. Things are definitely changing. I think that the charity sector is certainly, thanks to COVID, seen the benefits of being flexible working. But ultimately, it's the penalty for becoming a mother, subsequently not seeing, you cannot be who you cannot see. I think it's sadly those reasons, but it is changing. I'm not going to sit here and say, I can certainly tell you, give you the names of some really powerful, impactful charity leaders, but we still got a bit to go.
And if there are specific things that you like to change immediately, assume you've got a magic wand, what would those things be?
For every organisation to understand the benefits of flexible working, and that doesn't mean just because you're a woman and a mother, for everybody, because actually ultimately we all need to have an equal workplace so that everybody benefits. So you're not sat here thinking, well, she gets this and I don't get it because of the difference between you and I. It's for everybody to have that flexibility. That would be a magic wand for me.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect place to put it, because when we've got a workplace where everyone feels at home, then we have workplaces that really work for every single person. We'll get back to the panel now. Carl, over to you.
Thanks very much, Davis. Yeah, one final visit to our panel now before we wrap up the debate. I've got so many questions. I'll try and get through as many as I possibly can. I want to end, so I'll give you a little bit of thinking time on this one, by asking you on this International Women's Day, if you've got a shopping list of things that you would like to be achieved, what would be on them? So stew on that one, park that thought for a moment. But first of all, I just wanted really to maybe come to Debbie, because you touched about the gender pay gap there, and you mentioned earlier about how important it is. Equality on all kind of levels has got to be achieved if we're going to take this debate sensibly forward. Where are we at on that, do you think, in your sector?
I mean, I think just to be really clear about the distinction between gender pay equity and gender pay gap. So gender pay equity is two people getting paid the same for doing the same job, and gender pay gap is the all of the men and the women in the organisation versus all of the women in the organisation. So gender pay gap tends to be large because there's more women at the junior level and more men at the senior level. And until we get more women at senior levels, then there will always be a gender pay gap. So it doesn't in my industry, and I talk about the industry as a whole as opposed to the bank here, because I think that we're making great inroads at the bank. As an industry, it's really not changing very much at all. It's really not changing, and you'll only really see the change when you bring in more women at the top, because as I say, at the bottom, it tends to be sort of 50-50 on the intake, and then just women fall at the wayside. And some of it's maternity, but as I said before, a lot of it is just that women's talent is not recognised, and women are not promoted at the same level as men. There's some statistics out there. I think that on average, in the entry-level role, women get promoted 18 months after men get promoted. So it starts right there, and it continues through the career. And when you look at at the senior levels of the organisation, a 50-year-old woman going up for a partner role, that's not, and she doesn't get it, it's nothing to do with maternity leave. It's all about how people perceive what's required of a partner. And there's a lot of confluence between looking at what are leadership characteristics and what are male characteristics. And because men have been so many of the leaders in the past, then there's a view that you need to have these male characteristics in order to be a leader. And I think one of the things that I try and do, and others in my realm, is to show that you can actually be a very different type of leader. You don't have to be the leader that have the characteristics of leader past. That you can be warm, you can care about people. These are not, other terminology I hate, soft skills. It's not soft, it's actually called leadership. And I think that women have a lot of skills that they can bring to leadership that are just not recognised as such.
Do you think, Diane, you felt you've maybe had to prove yourself more throughout your career, to do what, maybe men would have found a door opening more easily for them?
I think so. I think that, well, I had my first child in the middle of the Christmas vacation in my law degree and didn't miss a day. And I don't think if man had to go into hospital, have surgery, he wouldn't have come in carrying the baby in the Moses basket, would he? So yes, you had to go the extra mile because, well, that's the only way it could be. You've just got to get on and do it. There's no one to pick up after you. You've got to do it. You've got to be carrying your own load. So yes, you have got to be tougher, more resilient, and harder in a way. You've got to be harder with yourself, certainly.
Do you feel that, Rosie? You've had to sort of build a hard shell. You know, maybe you had it already right from day one, but do you feel you've had to build and appreciate that you need it?
Yeah, I think I cut off from a lot of things. So I think, you know, years gone by, I've probably said it hasn't affected me. And then I've been put in certain situations over the past couple of years where I've actually there's no way that I can ignore the systemic injustices happening around me. And, you know, I think I've been quite blinkered in a self-preservation mode. And actually it's everywhere. It is everywhere. And I think, you know, sometimes we continue and we exacerbate those situations. I think when we move into those positions, some of those constructs are visible and others aren't. And by not opening the door for younger people, then we're continuing to maintain those constructs and keep people out. And I think, you know, there are still those constructs there. The doors, you know, I get invitations to sit on boards and be the only kind of woman or woman of colour, or I get to speak on panels and it's a similar kind of thing. And actually, you know, it's great to be visible, but you can see sometimes where it's in an organisation where it's the tick box exercise, and actually you have to get your foot in the door to be able to create that real change, but it's so incredibly exhausting. And, you know, it's not when you're just there as well. A lot of the change happens within, you know, outside of those roles. And I think as women, we don't necessarily have those private members clubs, or, you know, we don't, for me anyway, I don't spend as much time as my partner does at breakfast meetings and, you know, dinners and things like that, developing those informal networks to a level where they're actually going to create those changes. And it, you know, it's a full-time job in itself, and it's a mindset shift that actually we probably need to kind of pull into the limelight. I think, you know, we're part of a female entrepreneurs network that's a great network, and within that network there's kind of a group of women who operate at that kind of level because they do open doors for each other, and they you know, they're their own champions and they champion each other, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think we just need to embed that more across all of the different kind of industries and sectors, and just be open and honest about it, because it still does happen. It happens with men, and I think we just need to say, actually, let's make sure that we've got that for women as well, and actually male allies out there to make sure that the doors are opening for women as well, and for younger people.
Nicola, what's the situation on Colmore Bid? Have you got quite a good level of female representation now on the board then?
Yeah, so when I became chair in January 2020, we didn't, in my opinion, have enough females on our board. There wasn't enough of a mix. And so I basically just took the whole board through a process of we reduced the number of people on the board in the first place, but we also dramatically increased representation. So that's not just gender, that was across all sorts of things, including age as well, because we were increasingly getting older. So I wanted to make sure that was done. But interestingly, when we went out for recruitment, we made our lives, I think, better, but also tougher by making the process a blind process to get through to interview. So I mean, I literally put on LinkedIn, if you look at the board right now and you do not see yourself, please apply. I want people to apply if they can't see themselves for that very reason, because if we're always not applying because you don't see yourself there, then that's not going to help. It's kind of part of the system. It's not to say that that's where it started, but it's a perpetuation of the same issues. And actually, it was really lovely. We had really great breadth of people who applied, and now we are 11 private board members. We are 6 men and 5 women, so we're almost there. And because I actually do want to see if we can get it sort of a little bit the other way around. But that's not an easy thing to do. I'm going to slightly steal your next question, because you asked us to think about kind of our wish list or our magic wand. And I know there was a lot of debate years ago about the idea of having quotas of, you know, the number of women that should be on boards and things like that. And there was a lot of fierce debate about, look, we don't want to just be in the room because we're part of a quota system, because we're worried that, you know, well, then you just end up with not very good people on boards. Well, we've had that for years. We've had plenty of not very good people on boards. That doesn't matter whether you're male or female if you're not very good. But I would like to see more pressure, and if that is quotas, to start the whole thing off, because nothing's perfect and you've got to start somewhere and you can finesse it as you go. And I'd love to see that requirement that you've got to have more breadth across your board. How can you possibly be looking at a firm or a charity or whatever the entity is, whatever the organisation, and think that you've got a really good view on how the whole thing works if everything's looking through one single lens? It's just, you know, that would be my magic wand, I think.
You'd hope, wouldn't you, if it was a proper level playing field, that across most sectors you'd end up with a broad 50-50 representation, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Everywhere down the line. Okay, so you've started us off then,
Sorry.
Nicola, already. Diane, from your point of view, if you've got a wish list of something that you hope might come from debates like this, or that International Women's Day might trigger, what would it be? Is there a couple of things?
That we carry on thinking about it throughout the year, and that it isn't just a one-day thing, and that we develop a sensitivity and spot things so that other people aren't being put in, well, women particularly aren't in uncomfortable situations because men are carrying on like they always do. We need to actually recognise when people are in trouble and support them quietly.
Rosie?
I think spotlighting, really good practice, and that's within the home as well. So, you know, making sure that we're not putting up with anything less than 50% of the caregiving activities or the housework, and just to make sure that actually, you know, it is equal and we do get that extra time to have me time and take care of yourself and your own mental health as well, to be able to put back into all of the good stuff that we do in our business life.
Excellent. And I feel I should give our host today the last word. So, Debbie, round us off.
Gosh. So I would hope that we could try and put ourselves in other people's shoes. So we've talked a lot about how people don't know that their behaviours might be toxic to women because it's just how people have always worked in the workplace. You know, I don't know what it feels like to be a minority woman in the workplace, but the more I hear about some of the experiences, it makes me, you know, it's an eye-opener for me. So I think if we can get more men understanding what women's experiences are, and other people empathise with where other people are, I think that would be a big step towards understanding what needs to happen in order to get a more even playing field.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your contributions. Can we say a big thank you to the members of our panel? Folks, thank you very much indeed. Thanks also to Davis and members of the audience. I hope you found plenty of food for thought there. And finally, of course, big thanks to Unity Bank here for hosting us today. Thank you very much.